Light Yagami was able to do quite well on the grips, but considering that he was able to create his own team, it makes sense he would come out on top until the end. But now, we have the Screaming Gaffers route, which will use Screaming Gopher's Light, a version of Light that wasn't well liked by the campers around him. As a result, it may be a lot harder for him, but let's get into it. Light would keep a pretty low profile as he doesn't want to become a target already. He burned a lot of bridges last season, so now he has to go over the difficult task of convincing people that he's changed. In episode 1, I think he would try to reform an alliance with Heather, but would ultimately be unsuccessful because although Heather respects Light's game, she knows he will get rid of her as soon as the time arrives. Light doesn't stand much of a chance of winning part 1, but in part 2 he could win but decides not to, instead taking a shot for DJ so he can escape from Chef in the egg room. When Trent has to decide between the necklace or the egg, it wouldn't even be a real contest, with DJ grabbing the egg and Trent grabbing the necklace. Thus, unlike in canon, the team leaders are DJ and Gwen instead of Trent and Gwen. Ultimately, at the vote, Light's act of heroism would keep him from being eliminated, and instead Bridget and Jeff get eliminated. Light in confessional would talk about how stupid the cast is, thinking he'd take a bullet for DJ without any ulterior motives. Episode 3 is the team picking part of the season, which is an underrated mechanic in this series that should be used way more than it is. Unlike in canon, DJ is named the leader of the Screaming Gaffers, since I don't doubt that he can make it to camp before Gwen. Chris would tell the two that whoever picks first will get first choice, but to balance it out, the last camper will go to the team who picked second. Gwen would want the first choice, and so Gwen gets her first pick, and she picks Trent, obviously. DJ would pick Lashawna, Gwen would pick Beth, since she's really the only good female pick right now. DJ would pick Light, as thanks for saving him in episode 2. Lashawna would already be skeptical, but Light would assure her he's sorry for last season. Gwen picks Duncan, making Trent jealous, but not nearly as jealous as in canon. Lashawna would tell DJ to pick Heather since Heather doesn't like Light, so there's no risk of them teaming up and they can get rid of Heather the first time they lose. Gwen picks Lindsay, DJ picks Owen, Gwen picks Justin, DJ picks Izzy, and since Gwen got to pick first, Harold goes to DJ automatically. In the challenge portion of this episode, the Gaffers should have very little challenge beating the Grips. As a result, the Gaffers win and the Grips already have to go to elimination. Justin would get Lindsay and Beth and tell them about how Trent and Gwen are going to be teamed up until the end and they need to be broken up now before their numbers dwindle too much to face them. I feel like coming from Justin, Duncan would even agree to this plan, eliminating Trent already while Gwen and Trent vote for Lindsay. Episode 4 is a reward challenge, so it'll not be covered. Keep this in mind for every future Aftermath and reward challenge if I don't talk about them. Episode 5 is the Western movie challenge, and for the first part, which is jumping onto a horse from a diving board, Light, Owen, Izzy, and Harold would succeed for the Gaffers, while Duncan, Beth, and Lindsay would succeed for the Grips, ultimately losing to the Gaffers because in canon the second part was only done as a tiebreaker. Without the score being tied, it ends here, and Duncan will realize way too late that he's been swindled by Justin, as Justin, Beth, and Lindsay choose to vote off Gwen, while Duncan and Gwen vote for Justin due to him being useless in the challenge. I haven't spoken much about Light, but it's mostly because he'd be laying low at this point, trying to be more of a helpful persona compared to how he acted near the end of Island where he turned his filter off. Episode 7 and for part 1, Duncan would get locked in the cage for the Grips, while Heather would be locked in it for the Gaffers. Duncan could definitely eat whatever gross food the Gaffers prepared, considering DJ is there and will put Mama Spice in it. For part 2, the combined weights of Owen and Lashawna would definitely make it hard for DJ to push the cart, meaning the Grips should have an easy time winning the challenge compared to the Gaffers, who have to not only push 6 teammates to their designated location, but also dig a hole to the other side with spoons. As a result, at elimination, Light did enough to avoid elimination and Heather gets the boot. Heather would call them all idiots for believing Light had really changed. Episode 8 is a reward challenge, but Lashawna still wins the reward and talks trash about all the contestants in the game. Episode 9 is the horror movie challenge, where Beth would be chosen as the serial killer on the Grips, while DJ would be forced to be the killer by Chef. Ultimately, it would end basically the same as in canon, with Grips losing to the Gaffers because Duncan and Justin are not going to scream for Beth. As a result, at elimination, Duncan would be prepared to leave, but DJ would quit the game. Light wouldn't like this at all, considering that DJ was the major person vouching for him this entire time. Episode 10 is a reward challenge, and when it's revealed that Lashawna used them to get the reward in episode 8, Light would comment on how it's pretty funny that Lashawna wanted to talk about him being fake. Episode 11 is the War Movie Challenge, and things should end off pretty much the same way it did as in canon. Duncan would think he might have won votes from Beth and Lindsay to eliminate Justin, but Justin would reveal his new hair flip technique, which would allow Justin to stay in over Duncan, who'd talk about how he hopes they enjoy losing every challenge now. Episode 13 is the Bank Heist Challenge, and Lashawna would be locked in a vault. Now, Light could convince everyone to leave, but he wants to take a different approach to win her trust. He'd tell them that he's not leaving without the whole team being here, and despite protests from even Harold Harold about what she's done to him and everyone else. Light would say that they can't leave a teammate behind, winning immense amounts of respect from Lashana, Owen, and Harold, but Izzy would know. She always knows what someone's true intentions are. As a result, the grips make it to the go-karts first, and things definitely don't get better for the gaffers the farther we go, as even with Courtney being on gaffers now, by the time they reach the finish, the kart would have fallen apart and the grips would win. With Courtney being the primary target despite her immunity, the only vote that matters is Courtney's, and I doubt she would change it from in canon, so Owen leaves. Light would be pretty open to inviting Courtney on the team, despite everyone's hatred towards her, which she'd be gullible enough to believe is genuine niceness. Episode 15 is the Sports Movie Challenge. Part 1 would have Harold and Lindsay slow motion boxing, with Harold winning a point for the gaffers. Part 2 would have Beth facing off against Lashana, with Beth dominating Lashana after finding out what Lashana said about all of them. Beth would reveal what Lashana did, and Light would try to tell his team that it doesn't matter, she's still their teammate, but Courtney would point out if they let this slide, they will just be pushovers, like Light is apparently. Light wouldn't really care about her insulting him anyway, since he'd think he's way above her, so it wouldn't be hard to fake his reaction. Part 3 would have Justin facing off against Light, and Light would destroy Justin, dunking on him better than anyone else could here. Part 4 would be Beth versus Courtney, with Courtney pulling out the win, meaning it's 3-1, and so there would be no need for the tiebreaker competition. Justin would ultimately keep Beth over Lindsay, since Lindsay has stood up for herself and Beth hasn't. Episode 17 is the first elimination round of Merge. For part 1, I could see Izzy's costume winning only because I feel like she of all people will go overboard and make a whole mech suit, which in part 2 would be basically impossible to move in, making her advantage a waste. Courtney wins in the end, and Light would be able to convince Harold and Courtney to join into an alliance, and he'd be able to convince them to let Lashana in on the condition that they get rid of her next elimination. Light of course has no intention of keeping his word here, but this is fine enough for him as Izzy gets eliminated. Episode 19 is a fairy tale challenge. Courtney would be the princess, and so it ends up with Harold, Justin, and Light in the final part. Light would pretend to be beaten easily by Justin to not stand out, and Harold and Justin would fight, which Justin would win. Justin would be seconds away from beating the monster, only for Light to throw Justin off like Justin did to Harold in canon, and he pierces the monster, allowing Light to climb the tower to face Courtney, which would be a good duel. In the end, Light would ultimately dethrone Courtney and throw her off the tower, winning immunity for himself. At elimination, Justin would try to get Courtney into his alliance, which would work, so it would be Beth, Courtney, and Justin voting for Lashana, while Harold, Lashana, and Light vote for Courtney. The two are tasked with fighting against each other on the tower once again, but in Courtney's condition she can't compete, so Justin fights for her honor instead, which results in Justin losing. Since this is total drama and they definitely do something like this, because Justin stepped in to compete for Courtney, he is the one eliminated, not Courtney. Justin would leave and realize nobody actually cared about him at all this entire time, and he used people for nothing in the end. Episode 20 would have Light winning the challenge because it's a mystery challenge. Light would decide to take Harold to see the movie since he wants their alliance to remain strong. Episode 21 is the Rock and Roll Challenge, and also Owen's back because there is a need for drama in this timeline. Light would pressure Owen into telling him what he knows, which Owen would reveal he's an informant meant to stir up drama, which Light would agree to keep secret for him as long as he agrees not to vote for him. Owen would ask if it's an ultimatum, and Light tells him not to think of it as an ultimatum but a secret between friends, where if he breaks it, everyone will know the secret. Light would win part 1 of the challenge, and he'd win part 2 since I feel like out of everyone here, he has the most experience dealing with fans. Part 3 though would go to Courtney, and so she'd get the win. At this point, Courtney and Beth would both be trying to get Lashana and their alliance to vote off Light, but I doubt it would be successful, considering that Light has kept Lashana in the game way farther than Courtney or Beth would have. As a result, Beth is eliminated since Courtney isn't an option. Episode 22 would just have Courtney and Lashana facing off against Light and Harold, with no real drama occurring since Harold and Light are best friends with each other at this point, really just best friends in Harold's mind. So any attempts to plant any seeds of doubt isn't gonna work in any meaningful way. I do see Lashana pondering the idea of joining Courtney only because she wants to get rid of Light and she knows he's a tough competitor, but also knows that Courtney is just out for herself in the end. Episode 23 is the Space Challenge, where in part 1 Light would have the idea to shove Owen to block the breach in the ship, allowing him to choose the order for the next part of the challenge. Light would choose to have Courtney go first, Light second, Harold third, Lashana fourth, and Owen last. Courtney would do it in this timeline as she knows she's in danger, so she'd go ahead and compete in the challenge and gets a pretty good time. Light would be next, and I think he could last a lot longer than anyone else in this challenge through sheer willpower alone. Thus, he would win and the others would start to realize that he's way too good at this game. Harold would also start to realize that Owen is a traitor, and so Owen would convince Light that Harold is planning to betray him at the final 3. And so him, Owen, and Courtney would vote off Harold, and Light would explain what happened, putting a bad light onto Owen while giving barely other responsibility to him. Courtney would know that Light wasn't tricked. He's too smart to be tricked by someone like Owen. Light in confessional would express remorse over this decision though, saying that he feels dirty for betraying someone's trust in him so quickly before wondering if Harold has made him weak for caring about people like this. Episode 24 is the Animal Buddy Challenge, and Light would get the raccoon, Lashana would get the chameleon, and Courtney would get the shark. As a result, Light would win, and he'd choose to bring Lashana only because in his mind nobody would side with Lashana over him. Plus, Lashana owes everything to him. Of course, this would just be his justification, but a part in his mind knows he would never betray Lashana after basically promising to bring her to the finale. Owen and Courtney get eliminated this episode, Courtney due to not being picked to go to the finale, and Owen for not being needed anymore. The finale is here, Lashana versus Light. For all intents and purposes, they both tie, and so a vote will be needed from the eliminated contestants. Izzy votes for Explosivo, so now it's time to discuss the other votes. At this time though, Light's confessionals would be aired to the other campers, and Light would feel disgusted about his early game and how he treated everyone here like pawns. Light would say that although he feels no shame in playing the game, he feels shame in playing with other people's emotions to get ahead. Lashana never had her cheer in episode 15, so some people still hold grudges over her, despite Lashana saying that she's sorry multiple times. The eliminated contestants would even point out that this vote has no good option. DJ would tell them that he doesn't care what Light says in his confessionals. He took a bullet for him in episode 2 and brought Lashana further than any normal person would have. He may have done these initially to get ahead, but it's clear it's not the same Light. The votes are in, and with DJ's help, it went from an unwinnable situation to a 50-50. Light supporters would be Jeff, Bridget, Heather, DJ, Duncan, and Owen. The rest would vote for Lashana either because they have better rapport for her, or still haven't forgiven Light. In the end, the winning vote would be from Harold, the most thematically fitting contestant here. In Light's ending, he'd choose Light to win, which would even shock Light, but instead of being hated by everyone like in his Gopher appearance, everyone would cheer for his victory. Lashana would tell him thanks for bringing her to the end, it was fun. Harold would apologize to Lashana, but Lashana would say that it was only fair she lost after what she did. In Lashana's ending, Lashana would be in disbelief, and Light would actually congratulate her on her win. Light would be asked if he's bummed out that he didn't win, and he would say that it may be a good thing that he didn't. He can go into the next season with a clear conscience. Harold and Lashana would share a kiss, and the season would end here. But what did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below over which ending you wish to be canon and which route you prefer as a whole. World Tour is going to be my toughest season yet with 3 teams, but I think that I know how I'm going to do it now. Your input on which route you prefer is paramount to figuring out which versions of these characters I use in future videos. With that being said, thank you all for watching and have the day you deserve.